Our top story today is Palestinian migrants have been granted the right to live in Britain after applying through a scheme that was solely meant for Ukrainian refugees.
Yes, a family of 6 were allowed to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled that the Home Office's rejection of their application breached their human rights.
Lawyers have warned the Home Office that this could open the floodgates and it would lead to the admission of all those in conflict zones with family in the UK. That's anywhere in the world, any conflict zone around the world. And in the studio, a political advisor, James Price, with his take on this. James, how are you greeting this story?
Good morning. Well, I think you're right to tie it to these hotel story issues, because there's a simple issue here about Britain's capacity to take all of these people in. What happens, for example, because now if this ruling says you can just take an infinite number of people in, if every Palestinian comes to this country, all the other asylum seekers from all the refugee sites around the world, all these people coming along, what happens when every hotel room is full? You've started seeing already councils actually buying up private housing to start housing people as well. Well, that puts Brits who want to buy houses out of that market too, and that just shows the different kinds of pressures that we're having. Britain cannot take all of these people in. It should not take all of these people in. We should instead seek to be sort of, what would you call it, the grammar school of the world, and try and take, the best and brightest people we can. That would be good for the economy. We should take people who are more culturally compatible, people that understand the British sort of ways of life and traditions and mores. And I don't think that's necessarily true of people from cultures that are very, very different. And then, there's this whole other argument we've talked about before about judges making these kinds of decisions. They've got absolutely no, I think, proper right to do this, either morally or politically. And certainly they're not paying attention to all of these other catastrophic effects on local communities either.
Well, that's an interesting point. Do you think then the system needs to change entirely? Because we are seeing judges overturning decisions that have been made by the Home Office.
Yeah, I just think this is absolutely crazy to do this. And again, it's because these judges increasingly see themselves as working in the service of international treaty obligations, the ECHR people have heard a lot about, rather than the British national interest. Interesting, and I think it was Quentin who said this just now, that the father of the judge in question has been tweeting all sorts of things about how there's a genocide going on in Gaza and all these sorts of things. If these people want to be political actors, fine. They should put themselves up for election and put their ideas of, we're going to flood all of your communities with these so-called asylum seekers and fill up hotels that lead to all the kinds of problems we do. Put themselves up to the electorate for that, rather than hiding behind the judge's wig, or whatever it may be.
I just think all of this is so relatively simple, that you should run your country or your town or your village, whatever it is, the way you would run your own home. And you would say, right, am I in a position to let out one of my bedrooms, 2 of my bedrooms, or none of my bedrooms, or how do I want my town or home to look? And here we just have this idea that no matter who you are in the world, no matter what your problem is, that's Britain's problem. Yep. So the question is it really Britain's problem?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, and people at home will completely understand that. If you're doing quite well this year and you think, I've got some money left over, I might want to give it to a charity, might want to take in a Ukrainian refugee, as so many Brits did, especially at the start of that horrible invasion. And of course, I think probably the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a lot less complicated to think through than what's been happening in Israel and Palestine for a long time. But we have to face the facts that, sadly, this country is not a very rich country anymore. The economy has not really grown in the last, almost 20 years now. We've got increasing problems with crime. People feel unsafe on the street. You can't walk down the street with your mobile phone in your hand because someone will snatch it out. We're seeing, even from these recent arrivals, some stories, I think it was in Nottingham, of these so-called asylum seekers hanging around outside primary schools and trying to lure kids into woods and things. These are horrible things that we shouldn't definitely be thinking about at this time of the morning. We can't take in all of these people with all their many, many problems, as you say, until we've fixed the very deep issues we've got ourselves with our economy and with the rest. And there are some people who say, but they'll come and contribute to the economy, won't they? As if the mass migration has been good for this economy at all. It hasn't been. And other countries are starting to be brave enough to release the statistics about whether people from certain countries are a net contributor to the economy or a net drain. People that have come in the last few years are coming up on their what's called indefinite leave to remain. This idea that they could then stay forever. And you look at some reports, I think the Centre for Policy Studies put out, that some conservative estimates over the course of the lives of these people who've come, when they start bringing in lots of dependents, of children, of older people, all the rest of it, will be an absolutely enormous, so we're talking £200 billion plus extra cost to the economy. Far from making these things better, we're making things worse for Brits, and we shouldn't be taking in all of these people when we can't fix their problems, and we have no moral obligation to.
OK. James Price, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much. We're going through the papers now in the company of broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon and parliamentary sketch writer Quentin Letts. Very good morning, you two. Good to see you. Good morning. Claire, let's talk about this story. It's our top story today, actually. Court has given a Gazan family a right to settle in the UK.
Now, I don't think we can have judges making up or subscribing based on how people present themselves in law. I think we need closure in this. We need guidance from the government. I don't think it's right that judges have now overturned the tribunal at the beginning for this family of 4 or 5 who have come to this country now, legally under the Ukrainian refugee scheme. That was set up for something completely different when Russia did invade the Ukraine, and now this family from Gaza are claiming that through their lawyers and through their legal team to have right to remain in this country.
So if they get in, then anybody from anywhere could get in.
Yeah. And why are our judges in this country folding to international law and the ECHR so easily, so often, to the detriment of this country itself?
Quentin, what do you make of it?
It's an extraordinary story. This scheme was for Ukrainians. And a Gazan family turns up. I mean, all you need to do is sort of ask them a question in Ukrainian. And then if they can't answer it, you say, no, sorry, you can't come into this scheme. But they're Gazans, they're not Ukrainians.
I mean, it's just a loophole, hasn't it?
Well, is it a loophole? I think it's just a bonkers finding by the upper tribunal judge, Hugo Norton-Taylor. Whose dad writes for The Guardian. Well, how about that? And tribunal judges they are pretty low in the legal food chain, and they are quite often eccentric. Well, they reach eccentric judgments, put it like that. And this seems to be highly eccentric, to the point of just being bonkers.
It's the repercussions. What will happen next?
2 million. 2 million people now might well have the right to come to the UK. Well, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Dartford? No, that's full. Dover's busy. I mean, there's no room for these people.
I mean, do these judges ever think of the practicalities of things? You know, where are the schools? Where are the roads? Where are the hospital places?
Well, they don't, because they don't think about that, because that's not in the framework. That's not in the legal framework to measure a judgment or to make a judgment. They make a judgment presented with the facts that are there, that are presented to them. And it seems as if there's quite a low threshold. Not that people shouldn't have a right to live peacefully, not that people shouldn't have a right for shelter. That's a fundamental human right. However, this will open the floodgates. We had the story on Monday of this week, covered by The Telegraph as well, about the Albanian family who could not be extradited back to Albania because of the son's dislike for chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
Now, this is sound bites. This is, stuff coming from the courts. But this is the court of public opinion. And again, it seems to be an absolute slap in the face for the populist vote in this country and for people to realise what they can do and take control. There doesn't seem to be any control.
Well, also, there's no scrutiny of these judges. I would like Mr. Upper Tribunal Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor to come to GB News or to other broadcasting outlets are available, and explain himself. Because at the moment there is this sort of halo around the judiciary where they can't be held to account for their judgments. This judgment is so off-kilter that I think he needs to come out and say why he's reached it.
Especially when they can make such novel and expansive interpretations.
Novel.
Human rights.
Novel's one way of putting it.
Yeah. But do you think the human rights laws then need to be looked at so that Parliament gets a say rather than human rights lawyers?
Well, I mean, I'd come out of the ECHR, but that's never going to happen in this Parliament. But human rights laws have a basic idea of human decency, which is admirable. But they are, some people take the mickey out of them.
OK, your views very, very welcome. Have your say. You know what to do. Joining us now, the Shadow Housing Minister, Paul Holmes. Paul, good morning to you. And this story means that you're going to have your finger on that housing button even more than before, because this could open the floodgates, could it not?
Look, I think, Eamon, this is another example of the judiciary not representing the views and wishes of the British people. The government has a right to announce who wants to come into this country. The last government announced the Ukrainian visa scheme. It was not for Palestinians. So what I'm seeing and what I understand why many people are angry is that the judiciary are not taking the wishes of the British people as they should do. And the government now needs to act to tighten up those rules. We need to have a look at human rights law, as my leader, Kemi Badenoch, said last night. And that's something that we need to do, because you cannot have the judiciary and judges out taking a stance that is out of the policy that the government intended in the first place.
So, Paul, what would you do? How can you turn this around?
Well, look, we brought in a number of measures in the last government to make sure that people who were entitled to come here in a right and fair way could come here, such as the Ukrainian visa scheme, such as Afghan refugees. The Ukrainian visa scheme was not set up for any other asylum seeker to come into the country. So the government needs to tighten the legislation. They need to make it very clear to the judiciary that it is the government and Parliament's decision of who can come here and who can't come here. And the judges and the judiciary in this country need to step back, accept that that legislation is intended for the way and for the people that it's intended for, and make the right decision in these cases going forward. But the government now needs to legislate to tighten those schemes, tighten the rules, and say that it is the government's decision, as it was the last government and that building there, who decides who comes to this country and who doesn't.